Good day. So here I am playing around. First day of firing this up. Right now it's in SSG mode. I haven't tried to get the Tesla switch mode running yet. I don't have a lot of source for 24 volt because my solar system is 12. But it's a very interesting circuit, and I like the fact of how it's arranged when you go to charge 6 volt batteries. It's not hard to come by a 12, and when you acquire new 6s you need 12 to charge 6, so that kind of works out pretty nice. So I can sort of see why 49er really likes that setup, because I can relate. You know, you get your hands on a sulfated 6 Trojan, and that circuit works just fine even with the 12 volt solar system. Anyway, back to this. This is my charging battery setup. So it's sitting at 12.43, and now I'm guilty of doing what I say that everybody shouldn't do, and that is basically charging a battery that's pretty much already charged. I only used that one there to top up this one over here, and before I was able to look at that, 8 terrace on TV. Before I was able to make a video, that one came right up to 16.3 volts and started to boil a little bit, so I thought, oh well, I don't know about boiling these sealed lead acids. I haven't really done that, but these are all good batteries anyway, so I don't really need to be doing that. So over here, this one's fully charged, and this one's at 12.43, and so we'll fire it up. It's on a higher level of frequency. I don't want to take it too low right now because these ammeters are only 2 amps. Okay, so now here is something. As I bring my frequency up a little bit, this is my indicator light, you see, and then as I bring it right up, you can see it comes on strong. So that enables me to, after a while, I'll get to know what the brightness does as well. But as we all know, you can't necessarily believe these ammeters, but I hook them up anyways just because it gives you some kind of reference. So there we're dropping that down to 12.89 and running at about 380 milliamps, and charging batteries come up to that voltage, and it says it's putting in about 300. Now, I tend not to believe these during real high frequency, because I think that's where it really starts to lie. But it is interesting to watch 2 meters that are scaled the same as you're turning your pot and see exactly what does take place. It's interesting too how the input fluctuates, and how there seems to be sweet spots. Like you'll see dips. It's not just a linear progression as well. I'm not entirely sure on that, but it would appear that it isn't just a linear progression between input and output. And you know, of course it's gonna be dependent upon the battery too. So all I'm doing right now is I'm just looking at both of these, and you can see there when I have this at 12.87 and I'm pushing about maybe 320 on the milliamps there, I'm getting about 260 in there and charging. So you know, you can play around with the different relationships, and you can break out a calculator and really figure it out. But like that, for example, is a pretty decent one right there, where you have maybe 410, 420. No, it's closer to about 340 in, and about 270 going into the battery. Anyway, I'll fire it up. I'm running 50 ohms of my resistance, and I'm using this cap and diode thing. Okay, now there, for example, I'm drawing about, what would that be? 1.65 amps, and I'm putting in 1.1 amps, dropping that down to 12.6. She's up to 12.485. One of the things that I've thought too is that, you know, you have, obviously you have the relationship between these two numbers versus the relationship between these two numbers. You can't solely go by the amps alone. But the other thing that I wonder about is if you have a low output source, and this is where the scope comes in handy, but if you have a low output source, let's say, and you're putting into a battery over here, how much of that current is not making it because that current is under voltage? And I can see why a lot of people don't bother using 12 volts to try to charge 12 volts, although it's kind of neat that it works. How much of that current in the wave is under voltage and therefore basically just gets locked up in the system? But I am really happy that this aluminum wire doesn't heat up. You know, it's not like outrageous for heat or something. And everything seems to be pretty good. Not getting any real heat on the transistors. The other thing that I would like, okay, so that's my pot bottomed out right now. The other thing I've noticed is that it'll pull a hell of a lot more current without this capacitor. And one of the things right away that through tinkering around with the meters and stuff that I see happening is that, for starters, maybe I got it wired wrong, but I have some input resistance on my base here, okay, and then of course the pot, which is in series with that, and then at the end of that, that's what forms the RC circuit. So this resistor bank and this pot and this cap are all in parallel, and then I go through a diode here, little diode there, and then it comes out of there, and then it feeds all of my base circuits, which have their own resistors, and they're sitting at about 30 ohms or something like that. But one of the things that I wonder is that when you go through a diode, you know, you get a voltage drop. But in this situation, more significantly, in my mind anyways, is that you're adding a lot of resistance. So, I don't know, what is it? When you test a diode, you get about 400 or 500 ohms resistance on it. So, it doesn't surprise me that it will pull more current when I take this cap out. So if somebody can explain the whole purpose of that to me, that would be great, because I really don't see what it is other than basically like a voltage pump or current pump, where it's just changing the frequency and, you know, yeah, sure, it's dropping your input, but, you know, respectively, it's dropping your output as well. So I don't know if somebody understands that, where the benefit is in all of that. I could see setting it up, like I've used this same arrangement in a Joule Thief, and I'm looking for better lumen output by tuning the circuit. But I don't see it in this situation, because your battery voltage is constantly changing. The internal impedance of that is changing. How can you possibly tune this circuit for all situations that arise? You know, or is just on average, is it more efficient or what? I don't know what the end all purpose of that was, to be honest. But it does work. It definitely does work, and there's a bunch of reasons why I set this thing up like this. I can change anything and do repairs or anything without having to break out the soldering iron, really, with a few small exceptions. I can add heat sinks to these, though I don't think I'm going to need them, which is something that I learned on my last one. I mean, these guys aren't even warm, you know. One single one of these transistors could push almost 10 times as much current as this whole circuit is right now on its own. So there's really nothing for heat. They're completely underutilized, really, with the exception of their ability to handle voltage, which is why they get chosen, I suppose, because of spikes and whatnot too. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy. I think that the aluminum is pretty decent. I don't like when I take that cap and diode off. Just a sec here. Let's see. I'll turn it down a bit first before I do this. Okay, I'll disconnect it. Of course, I still have the resistance of the diode, because that's still in there. But you can see, as soon as I disconnect that capacitor, I can then take this thing okay, so I could go a little higher, but I've got 2 amps input, and that's my output. She's charging like a demon right now. You know, at the cost of more current, of course. One thing I can see that, the benefit of that, though, I was thinking about this. In a situation where you're running that directly off of solar, because your base is responsible for driving your transistors, and that whole base circuit is then responsible, I can see that allowing for some fluctuation where sun is going in and out of clouds and stuff. If you have enough capacity there, you're going to have a smoother drive on those transistors. So that's one area that I can sort of see. But you know, I can't take this to a really low frequency because there's that 400 ohms of resistance. That's how I see it. With that diode, you might as well just add 400 to your total, unless I'm wrong. I don't know for sure. Okay, but when you measure the resistance across a 1N4007, you on your little diode checker, on your meter, 400 or 500. Right? So that's a lot of ohms. Anyway, just experimenting, having fun. I think the aluminum worked out fairly well. Naturally, it has more resistance. So I think it was 49er who suggested this. It would have been better. I think that I think the only difference between using aluminum wire and copper wire is that you ought to buy a larger gauge. So for example, if I really wanted this to be a 5-filer 18 gauge circuit and compare it to copper completely, I probably should have had 20 gauge aluminum instead of 18 or something, like a little fatter wire for what you would normally use copper. But she works. Fired up first try too. I was kind of happy about that. So obviously I am getting to know the Bedini a little bit better. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.